From the very beginning of Jujutsu Kaisen, Ryomen Sukuna never felt like a normal villain. And honestly, that's what made him terrifying. Most anime villains scream, they rage, they explain their tragic backstories. But Sukuna? He smiles. Even during absolute chaos, he stays calm. And somehow, that calmness feels more horrifying than violence itself. Because Sukuna doesn't fight like someone trying to survive. He behaves like someone completely above humanity. Almost like a king casually watching insects struggle beneath him. And the terrifying part is, he genuinely believes that. The moment Sukuna appeared inside Yuji's body, the atmosphere of Jujutsu Kaisen completely changed. Suddenly, the series no longer felt safe. Every scene involving Sukuna carried tension. Because deep down, everyone understood the same thing. If Sukuna truly wanted to, he could destroy everything instantly. And, unlike most villains, he would feel absolutely nothing while doing it. That's what made his smile so disturbing. It wasn't anger. It wasn't madness. It was enjoyment. Most villains still hold on to something human. Pain, loneliness, hatred, dreams. But Sukuna feels different. He doesn't seek revenge. He doesn't want justice. He doesn't even care about ruling the world. Sukuna simply does whatever he wants. And that freedom makes him terrifying. Because morality means absolutely nothing to him. Human lives hold no value. Suffering means nothing. Death means nothing. To Sukuna, weak people simply exist to be crushed. And the scariest part? He never pretends otherwise. Unlike humans who hide their cruelty behind excuses, Sukuna is brutally honest about what he is. A monster. That honesty creates psychological horror around him. Because every time Sukuna appears, there's no negotiating. No emotional weakness. No hidden kindness waiting underneath. Only destruction. Pure destruction. And somehow, that complete lack of humanity makes him feel more real than most anime villains. The truly horrifying thing about Sukuna isn't his power. It's how relaxed he always looks. Even during life or death battles, Sukuna rarely panics. He smiles, laughs, analyzes, almost like everything happening around him is entertaining. And psychologically, that calmness destroys tension for everyone around him. Because fear normally comes from uncertainty. But Sukuna never looks uncertain. Even against the strongest opponents in the series, he remains terrifyingly composed. And that calmness creates an overwhelming feeling that he's always in control. Like a predator observing trapped prey. That's why scenes involving Sukuna feel so uncomfortable. The audience understands something the characters don't want to admit. Once Sukuna starts enjoying himself, things are about to become horrifying. And the worst part? He enjoys suffering. Not because he's emotional, not because he's angry, but because destruction itself entertains him. That mindset feels less like a human villain, and more like a natural disaster wearing a human face. Sukuna doesn't hate humanity. And honestly, that's even scarier. Hatred still requires emotional attachment. Sukuna simply sees humans as insignificant, tiny, fragile, temporary. That's why he kills so casually. Not because he's emotional, but because human lives genuinely mean nothing to him. And throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, Sukuna constantly reminds everyone of this brutal worldview. Weakness disgusts him. Dependence disgusts him. People begging for mercy disgust him. To Sukuna, only strength matters. Nothing else. And while that philosophy sounds monstrous, it also strangely reflects the brutal world of Jujutsu Kaisen itself. A world where weak people constantly die. A world where kindness often gets punished. A world where survival belongs to monsters. That's why Sukuna feels so terrifying narratively. Because deep down, part of the world itself agrees with him. You'd expect cursed spirits to worship Sukuna, but many of them fear him instead. And honestly, that says everything. Because curses themselves are born from human negativity. Hatred, fear, pain. Yet even they understand Sukuna is different. He isn't simply evil. He's beyond it. Sukuna feels more ancient, more absolute. Like violence itself became human. That's why even powerful curses hesitate around him. Because Sukuna doesn't care about allies. He doesn't care about loyalty. And he certainly doesn't care about their survival. If they become useless, he destroys them instantly. No hesitation, no guilt, no remorse. That unpredictability creates terrifying tension around him, because unlike other villains, Sukuna cannot be controlled. Not by curses, not by sorcerers, not even by the story itself sometimes. And that uncontrollable nature is exactly what makes every Sukuna scene feel dangerous. The most disturbing thing about Sukuna is that he understands people perfectly. He knows exactly what humans fear: loss, pain, death. And instead of avoiding those emotions, he weaponizes them. That's why Sukuna's presence feels psychologically terrifying. Because he doesn't just destroy bodies, he destroys hope. Every time people think they finally have a chance, Sukuna reminds them how powerless they truly are. And the scariest part? He enjoys watching that realization happen. You can see it in his expressions. That calm smile, that amusement, almost like human suffering is entertainment to him, which makes Sukuna feel less like a villain and more like a predator studying weaker creatures. Even Yuji understands this. Deep down, Yuji knows Sukuna cannot be reasoned with. There's no hidden sadness inside him, no emotional weakness, no humanity waiting to be saved. Only hunger, only destruction. And that realization slowly destroys Yuji mentally throughout the series. Because how do you fight something that genuinely feels beyond human? Most anime villains still feel human somehow. But Sukuna feels closer to a catastrophe, like an earthquake, a tsunami, a force of nature. Because when Sukuna appears, destruction becomes inevitable. The atmosphere changes instantly. Characters panic. Cities collapse. Hope disappears. And unlike emotional villains driven by rage, Sukuna destroys things calmly. That calmness creates overwhelming fear, because it feels effortless, as if human lives are too insignificant to even deserve emotion. And visually, Jujutsu Kaisen constantly reinforces this idea. The overwhelming cursed energy, the blood-red skies, the impossible destruction. Sukuna doesn't just enter scenes. He consumes them. That's why even powerful sorcerers fear him. Not because they think they might lose, but because Sukuna feels fundamentally unstoppable, like fighting against death itself. And honestly, that fear might be completely justified. Sukuna represents something deeply terrifying. Freedom without morality. He does whatever he wants, kills whoever he wants, destroys whatever he wants, and feels absolutely no guilt afterward. That level of freedom sounds powerful, but it's also horrifying. Because morality is what separates humans from monsters. Empathy, compassion, restraint. Sukuna has none of those things, which makes him feel almost empty emotionally, like a being that evolved beyond humanity entirely. And strangely, that's what makes him fascinating too, because Sukuna never lies about what he is. He never pretends to be righteous, never acts heroic, never hides behind excuses. He embraces his monstrous nature completely. And in a world filled with hypocrisy, that honesty becomes disturbingly compelling. Even if it's horrifying, the reason Sukuna became one of anime's most terrifying villains is because he feels unpredictable. Viewers genuinely never know what he might do next. And unpredictability creates fear, especially when combined with overwhelming power. One moment, Sukuna looks calm. The next moment, entire city blocks disappear. And because he lacks empathy, there are no emotional limits stopping him. That's what separates Sukuna from normal villains. Most villains hesitate eventually. Sukuna doesn't. He simply acts. And throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, that unpredictability constantly creates tension. Even when Sukuna isn't on screen, his presence still affects the atmosphere. Because everyone understands the same terrifying truth. If Sukuna fully returns, everything changes. The balance of the world itself collapses. And honestly, that level of fear is rare, even among anime villains. At the end of the day, Sukuna terrifies people for one simple reason. He doesn't feel human anymore. Not emotionally, not psychologically, not morally. He feels like humanity's darkest instincts given physical form. Pure selfishness, pure violence, pure freedom. And maybe that's why Sukuna feels so unforgettable. Because deep down, he represents a terrifying possibility. What happens when power exists? Without compassion? Without guilt? Without humanity? Jujutsu Kaisen answers that question through Sukuna. And the answer is horrifying. Because Sukuna doesn't destroy people out of hatred. He destroys them because he can. And somehow, that makes him even scarier. Not a broken man. Not a tragic villain. Not a misunderstood monster. Just something beyond human understanding. And maybe that's what truly makes Sukuna terrifying.